Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I'm going to bring you my December book haul. So these are all the books that I got in December, minus my Christmas books. I have done a Christmas book haul, and I will link that down below if you want to check it out. I just happened to have received or bought a lot of books this month, and I wanted to kind of separate them out because Christmas is always a funny month for book hauls because in my family, we tend to give each other a lot of books. So there's just a lot of stuff to talk about. In the month of December, I ended up bringing in about 22 books that were not Christmas books. It was a great month for Book Post. It was also a great month for charity shops. I didn't end up actually buying any of these books for full price, which is at least something. As per usual, I am going to divide this up into books that I sort of acquired on my own and books that I was sent from publishers. So I'm going to start with the books that publishers sent me this month. The very first book that I received from publishers this month is actually one that I've already talked about in my December wrap-up because I did end up reading it this month. This is Dumplin' by Julie Murphy. This is the film tie-in version. I talked about that book a little bit. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars because I fell in love with the film and I didn't love the book as much, although I think that there are good parts and not so good parts for both the film and the book. The film is what really won me over. So if you want to hear a little bit more about my thoughts on Dumplin', you can go ahead and check out that video below. The next book that I have to show you from publishers this month is actually from Macmillan, and this is one I'm very, very excited about. This is Enchanté by Gita Trelease. This is a book that combines history and fantasy, which of course you know is something that I absolutely love, and I am extremely excited to read this book. It is about a girl named Camille who is orphaned in 17th century France, and she survives on her sort of very modest magic that she inherited from her mother, but she decides she's going to enter into the court of King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. I'm really excited to read this book. I just know it's going to be one of those books that I really love, and it comes out on the 21st of February in 2019 if you are interested in reading it too. Next book that I have comes from Rock the Boat, and it's one that sounds really, really interesting, but also really weird, and I'm very excited to read this young adult science fiction book. This is Once and Future, and this is by 2 authors actually. It's Amy Rose Capetta and Corey McCarthy. This book is both a retelling and a sort of reincarnation story of King Arthur. This main character in our book is the 42nd reincarnation of King Arthur. It sounds really weird, it sounds really cool, it's all set in space, and I think this is going to be a really strange but really fun read. This one comes out in March of 2019. The next book that I have comes from Harper Teen, and it looks so good. I think that this is going to be a really excellent book. This is exactly my cup of tea. This is The Antidote, and this is by Shelley Sakier. This book takes place in a world where magic is not really accepted, particularly with all the healers in this world. However, our main character's best friend gets ill, and she uses just a little bit of her magic in order to heal him, and that sort of sets off this whole series of events. She gets swept up in all of these secrets. This sounds really good. I know very little about this. I actually hadn't heard of this book before the kind of request email went out, so I'm very, very interested in this. I'm also very interested to hear what other people think of it too. This book is due to come out in the UK on the 5th of February, so you'll be able to pick it up very soon. The last book that I have from publishers this month also comes from Harper Teen, and this book is already out right now, so if you're interested, you can pick it up. It's not one that I've heard about at all, and it's been out for a few months, which I find really surprising because I really like young adult science fiction, and this sounds a little bit like it has shades of another book that I really love. This is The Splinter Silence, and this is by Kayla Olson. This book follows a character named Lindley Hamilton, and she has sort of assumed the captainship of this spaceship that she is on after a deadly virus wipes out all of the adults, including her own parents. So she's in charge of this kind of second generation of astronauts, and it looks like this virus might be back. However, she's beginning to realize that it might not be a virus at all, but perhaps one of their own is a killer. This sounds really great. This sounds like the kind of book that I would really love, particularly for science fiction, which I haven't read in a while. I've really been reading a lot of fantasy lately, so I would love to get back to sci-fi, and this sounds like it has some similarities to The Loneliest Girl in the Universe by Lauren James, which is a book that I absolutely love. The next books that I have here actually are ones that I saved from an unhaul pile. So my friend Asha was getting rid of some books, and I decided that these were all ones that I was curious about and wanted to try, so I just thought that I would snap them up. I don't know how I'm gonna feel about these books, but they're definitely ones that I'm interested in. So this first whole stack is the first 4 Throne of Glass books by Sarah J Maas. I don't know how I'm gonna feel about these books. I don't know if I'm gonna like these at all. I read A Court of Thorns and Roses and I absolutely hated it. I was actually, I think, not harsh enough on it because I didn't want people to hate me when I read it when I first started blogging, and now I just care a little bit less. I really hate that book so much, and I liked some of the sort of aspects of kind of her writing and her characters and stuff, I guess. So I thought that I would give Throne of Glass a try before kind of writing her off, because I know that this is kind of her big series. It's just finished, and this does sound like it's a little bit more my thing. The Throne of Glass, as far as I know, I think it gets quite complicated at some point, but Throne of Glass follows a girl who is a sort of notorious assassin, and she has been captured and imprisoned, and she has been told that if she fights in this kind of competition and she wins, she can earn her freedom. That's all I know about it. I don't know. I think that if I'm gonna like one of Sarah J Maas's series, it's more likely to be this. I now have the first 4. We'll see how it goes. The next book that I got from the unhaul pile is The Surface Breaks by Louise O'Neill. This is a feminist retelling of The Little Mermaid, and I don't know a huge amount about it. It was one that I was really interested in reading when it first came out, and then I started to hear a lot of really mixed reviews about it. I know that it's really bleak, and I know that it is, it has some themes that make it kind of an unpleasant read, but I'm really interested. I'm really curious about this book, so I will see how it goes. Last but not least, I have the books that I bought for myself this month. So there are a fair few here, but they are either from charity shops or they're from like the penny paperbacks on Amazon, and I am very excited for all of these. I think that these are going to be really interesting, or they're going to be fantastic books. So to start off with, I picked up a copy of Contact by Carl Sagan. This is one of the books that Becky Chambers mentioned when she did her talk here in Oxford about Record of a Spaceborne Few, which was one of my favorite books of last year. I love Becky Chambers, I love her books, and this is kind of the book that she cited as being a big inspiration for her books because it's all about first contact. It's a very kind of almost like a peaceful science fiction novel. You tend to think of sci-fi as being sort of shoot 'em up adventure, kind of grim kinds of books, but apparently this is it's just about first contact, and it's just apparently sort of has the same feeling as her books. And I read Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot and Cosmos last year, and I really love the way he writes his nonfiction, so I thought that I would give this a try. The next book that I have is one that came highly recommended, and I have been wanting to read for a long time because it pops up on sort of underrated fantasy lists, and so I ended up picking up a copy of this book. I don't know a huge amount of what it's about, but I'm very excited to read The Dragon Prince by Melanie Ron. This book was published in 1988, which is the year that I was born, and I've been wanting to read a lot more older fantasy, kind of classic fantasy from the 70s and the 80s, because I feel like there's just a huge chunk that I'm missing. Ever since I started reading books for booktube and book blogging, I've been really focused on new releases, and I have not been reading the older books, the classics of my genres, and so this seemed like a really great place to start. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really have a good idea of what this book is about. The back copy isn't the most descriptive, but it came so highly recommended, again by my friend Asha, that I decided I was going to just give it a try and see what it's like. Again, it's one that I wanted to read for a long time. The next book is one that I have actually read, and I read it in high school when I went through my kind of first very intense fantasy phase, and I never ended up finishing up the sort of, I think it's a quartet, I think it's 4 books, but I haven't really been able to kind of shake this one out of my head. I wanted to read it as an older fantasy reader. This is Rhapsody by Elizabeth Hayden. This book follows, I think it's a character named Rhapsody who may be a kind of singer slash prostitute, and she is on the run from creepy dudes and she bumps into a couple of shady characters, and she ends up being dragged onto this sort of epic voyage. I remember there's like time travel in this, there's a lot of like crazy magic, and there's a lot about kind of music as well. So this was a really interesting one. I remember almost nothing about it, but it's going to be a really fun one to reread. Again, I think there's 4 books. I think I read the first 2. The next book that I have is actually a duplicate of one that I already own. I forgot that I already own this book. This is Fly By Night by Frances Harding. I love Frances Harding from the one book of hers that I've read, which is The Lie Tree. It's one of my favorite books ever. It's so, so good. And I have been wanting to branch out and read some more of her books. And I got very, very excited when I saw one of her books on the shelf at the charity shop without thinking that I own this one with a different cover, which is why I accidentally bought a duplicate. Oops. This book follows a character named Mosca Mai, and she has a goose companion, and there's murder, and there's highwaymen and spies and insane rulers, and this is another one where it just doesn't tell you much on the back, but it sounds really fun, and I really, really, again, enjoy her books. They're super weird, and they're so incredibly sort of gripping and atmospheric. The next book that I have is an interesting one because I don't know if I'm gonna like it or not, to be perfectly honest. I've not heard great things about it, but I loved this author's other book that she wrote, and I'm very interested to see what I think. This is Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. So Paula Hawkins wrote, of course, The Girl on the Train, which is a fantastic thriller that I really, really loved, and this is her second book, her follow-up book. And I don't know if it's a case of she had her entire life to write her first book and had a deadline for her second book, or people's expectations were different and so that's why it didn't get great reviews. I don't really know. I'm very interested to read this one myself. Next up, really quick, we have another edition of The Hobbit by Tolkien. I picked this up in the Oxfam shop that's near where I live, and I collect editions of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. This is one that I didn't own, so I thought that I would pick it up. I think one day I'm gonna do a video of my collection of Lord of the Rings books, but I don't know, I don't think it's quite big enough yet. But if you're interested in seeing that, let me know. The next book that I have is one that is very, very dear to my heart. This was one of my favorite books as a child. This is The Phantom Tollbooth, and this is by Norton Juster. So if you have read this, please let me know, because I feel like no one has read this book. It was such like a huge and impactful, informative book for me as a child, and I feel like no one has read it, and that's like completely baffling to me because this book was so, so important to me as a kid. This book follows a boy named Milo, and he is very bored with his life. He's very depressed. Everything is sort of washed out and gray for him. And he comes home one day to a giant gift package in his room, and he decides, whatever, he might as well open it up. And it's a little kind of toy toll booth. And so he takes his little car, one of the ones that I really wanted when I was little, and he's like, okay, whatever, I'll just play with it. And he drives through, and it sort of transports him to this incredible, amazing land. This book is all about wordplay, and it's all about sort of puns and playing with words and letters, and it's so incredibly cool. This is where I got my love of words from. I very much credit this book with sort of my love of reading now. So as an example of something from this book, he goes to Dictionopolis, the city of words, which is like my fantasy place to go to. I would live in Dictionopolis, as silly as it may be. And he goes to the letter market, where you can buy every single letter from the alphabet, and it explains that letters like A and E are really sort of sweet and tasty, so people tend to use those a lot, but letters like X and Z are kind of gross, so no one tends to use those, and it's just like an incredibly clever book. I love it so much, and I am super, 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 super excited to reread this. Next up, I have a young adult favorite that I have not read yet. I really want to catch up on kind of the YA books that I've missed because, of course, I am still fairly new to young adult. I only started reading it in early 2017, but this is The Darkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken. This was recently made into a film, and I think I completely missed it. I think it's like come and gone from theaters. I think I completely missed it, but it sounded really, really cool and really interesting. It feels very much like a sort of X-Men inspired world. There are these children that survived this virus and has kind of awakened this power in them, and it follows these kids. That's really all I know about it, but it sounds really interesting. I found this really cool hardcover edition, so I thought I might as well give it a try because I know that people really love this series. The last book that I picked up from charity shops this month is a personal favorite of mine. I read these books originally on Kindle, so I thought that I would snap up the first one when I saw it in the charity shop, and I'm going to also pick up the second and third. This is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. The First Law trilogy is one of my favorite series ever in fantasy, and if you get me talking about it, I will like work myself up into absolute excitement and joy. I love these books so much. They are super dark, super dark and violent and grim, and they're so good. The Blade itself follows 3 characters. We have Logan Ninefingers, who is our barbarian type character, and he's my fave. And we also follow a character named Jezzel, who's sort of the kind of golden boy, very handsome, perfect, sort of prince-like character, and a man named Glotka, who is my other favorite character, who's the torturer. War is brewing in this land, and all of these characters are going to have separate storylines that eventually come together. It's kind of complicated, and I can't give anything away, but if you haven't read this book yet, and you like kind of grim dark books, then this is like perfect. The last 2 books that I have here are actually from Fairy Loot for December, so if you have not received your Fairy Loot box for December yet, you can skip ahead a little bit. I will be very brief. The first book is a proof copy that was included in the box. This is The Storm Crow, and this is by Kaylin Josephson. So this comes out in, I think, July of 2019 from Sourcebooks. So I don't know anything about this. I actually hadn't heard of this before, but I'm very interested in picking it up. I know that one of my friends has said that it is very highly anticipated for her, so I am gonna give it a try. We'll see how it goes. I have some time before it comes out though. The book for the Fairy Loot box of December was Fire and Heist, and this is by Sarah Beth Durst. This is not one that I had heard of, and I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you, I have no idea what it's about because it sounds really complex and complicated, but it involves dragons and heists and thieving, and our main character has to try to find out what happened to her mother, and I don't know, I probably wouldn't have picked this one up on my own. I don't know what it is about it, but I'm gonna go ahead and read it because I want to read all of my Fairy Loot books, but I don't know. We'll see how this goes. I would really like to know if anyone has read this yet because I know literally nothing about this. That is it for my December book haul. You can go ahead and check out my Christmas books below because I also obviously got those in the month of December, and I would also love to hear what books you picked up in the month of December. If you ended up hauling any of these books, if you've read any of these books, I would really love to hear from you. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.